Hi, Dad. Welcome back.
Sorry, buddy.
Hey, hi, Dad. Welcome back to another episode of Dave and Andy's Honest About Life. How you doing today?
I'm doing well, buddy. How are you?
I am well. I am well. Thank you for asking. It's always wonderful to see you and
You
uh,
as well.
and connect with you and get your thoughts on what's going on in the world. Speaking of that, there's a storm that is in the southern part of the United States, traveling west to east, as you'd expect. I think it's currently in like maybe Louisiana, parts of Texas, northern Texas. It's going to go across what Mississippi, Alabama, et cetera. They said they used a term which I think I've heard you use before, but it's something like derecho or what
Yeah,
is it?
Derecho. That is a common name for a northwest to southeast traveling line of thunderstorms, a front that is extremely dangerous and extremely destructive. It has constant winds of 100 to 120 miles an hour, and it's a steady moving storm that travels for miles, if not hundreds of miles. We had a derecho, really bad one in northern Minnesota, southern Canada, back 30 years ago, that downed so many trees that they were worried that it was going to start forest fires. And though that dead timber did start on fire, so that's another problem. But it's traveled from southern Canada through Minnesota, through Wisconsin, parts of Michigan, into Illinois and Indiana, and didn't really die out until Ohio. It was just a steady moving, unbelievable gust front.
And so, what makes it so significant on the front end of a storm like that? What is it?
It's because it's so much larger. It's so much larger than a normal thunderstorm that may down some trees and cause some damage, be a severe thunderstorm, maybe 10 to 15 miles wide, where these derechos can be 100 miles wide and just laying destruction down along the way. So yeah, they're much larger, and it's a complex of thunderstorms that creates it rather than a single thunderstorm. A lot of times when we get a severe thunderstorm warning, it's one thunderstorm, and that can be 10 miles wide, and we have to like warn an area that's 20 miles wide. But when you get a derecho, usually you know that it's going to start to happen because a complex of thunderstorms starts to draw on the upper level winds, and it funnels that destructive wind that's over 100 miles an hour down to the surface. When you got a thunderstorm that's building 50 to 60,000 feet up in the atmosphere, it deflects those very strong upper level winds down to the surface.
Wow, that's impressive. And the fact that you remember all those details, it's not like you haven't been out of it that long.
No,
Uh,
but we hear about derecho a lot lately, and I remember when we first used the term back 30 years ago, maybe 25 years ago, nobody knew what it was. And now people are starting to remember what this derecho was that went through and destroyed so much of their state or so much of their, city. And the people listen when they hear derecho.
Now they do. To your point about we're becoming familiar with it and the significance of it. There was a story. Speaking, now that we're on the topic of weather, there was a story. I think it was on nightly news last night about Georgia's peaches, even South Carolina's peaches, experiencing too warm of weather to support the growing season. The peaches apparently don't like it to get too hot, which I'm surprised to hear because I thought the reason they were so far south is because they really liked it hot. So does it surprise you to hear that their harvest is going to be incredibly low, just poor this year because of that? Does that surprise you at all? Warmer than normal temps?
It doesn't. No, I think, there. I've talked about this for years. There are cycles that go on, and farmers and agriculturists realize these cycles, and they plan ahead for them.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they know when this stuff is going to happen. I just realized something, Andy. Is my sound all right?
Yeah, it's
Because
great.
I realized I didn't plug in my boom mic. I don't have my big mic plugged in.
It's fine. It's fine.
Okay. As long as it's good and you can hear me, I'm good.
I can hear you just fine. So they plan for it.
Yeah.
there's this whole talk about what is it? Is it El Nino or La Nina? One or the other. What are we experiencing that seems to be a bit worse than normal?
Right now, I believe it's La Nina. And I have to go, I have to go check that because I have not been keeping track of that. But it does vary. El Ninos occur more frequently than La Ninas. El Nino is when the Pacific waters at the equator are warmer than normal. And La Nina is when the waters are colder than normal out in the Pacific. So it does affect the atmosphere and the atmospheric motion that happens over the United States. So the United States is affected greatly by that phenomenon, both El Nino and La Nina. And and I'm sorry, I wish I knew which one was going on right now, but I haven't been paying that close attention to it. But I believe it was La Nina. And those happen to be very strong on one side or the other, but El Nino can be strong as well. We've lived through some very strong El Ninos recently, over recent years, and it has really altered the climate here in the United States.
Like to your point about the United States being, uniquely positioned, Pacific on one side, Atlantic on the other. I think we're most affected by water temp in the Pacific, ocean temps in the Pacific.
Correct, because it's a west to east flow over the United States. That we're in the westerlies. So yeah, that's correct. Most of the stuff that goes on in the Pacific is what really affects us.
Interesting. Well, thank you for that. I always enjoy, as I say every time we talk about it, I enjoy, hearing you do your thing, talking about weather.
I love weather. You know that it's part of my being, and it's so interesting that we only touch the surface as to understanding what is creating the weather that we have, and that understanding seems to get smaller and smaller as we know more and more. Our real understanding of what's going on is not very extensive.
Oh, well, I appreciate, sometimes it takes the humble approach to recognize that we know so little, right? It's when we start thinking we know everything that we get in trouble.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Dad. Wonderful to see you today, and look forward to the next time.
Thanks, buddy. Love you.
Love you, Dad. Bye now.